Hello and welcome now to episode 16 of Beyond the Box Score. Trayvon Hastings, Joey Korzanowski. We just got done doing 15. We're going to do 16 now, and we're going to transition it and jump right into the college football playoff, the rankings that had just came out. We're not going to discuss it like too much. There's not really a whole lot to talk about. It's pretty self-explanatory. BYU wins and they're in. Notre Dame is out. If Notre Dame somehow can survive some things happening, such as Alabama losing or BYU losing, they should be fine to be in the playoff. And based off the betting odds, Alabama's minus 4 digits right now, so like minus 2,000 to get into the playoffs. So more than likely they're in with a loss as well. You would be comparing them to the likes of the BYUs and so on and so forth. But if Alabama loses and BYU wins, we might have a different conversation. So I think BYU would get in. Texas Tech would stay in over Alabama as well. And then the Crimson Tide could potentially be on the way out. But we both think Notre Dame shouldn't even be there to begin with. That's a whole nother thing. The hypocrisy of the college football playoff rankings and their committee. And what a joke they have made it, to bluntly put it. But enough of that before I go on about it forever. Let's go into the conference championships and preview these various games across all of the conferences. We're not going to probably do all of them, but we are going to talk about the ones with meaning to the CFP specifically. And we'll start in the Big Ten with Ohio State and Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know this game doesn't necessarily have the highest, stakes in terms of the college football playoff, determining, the order for that. But look, I think this is the game of the year so far. I mean, this is number one versus number two, right? You have last year's defending national champion that has looked largely unstoppable since that loss to Michigan last year, right? I mean, they stormed through the playoffs. They've stormed through everybody this year. I mean, nobody has really challenged them since Texas in the beginning of the year. Well, who better than the next up and coming team, right? That has also looked dominant against everybody. And the main knock on Indiana is that, outside of Oregon, they haven't played anybody. Well, it's the same thing with Ohio State. People say they haven't beat anybody. They don't have a statement win. Well, again, while this game doesn't necessarily have the most impact on the college football playoff, I have a hard time imagining that these two teams aren't going to come out fired up and come out amped up to take on each other. I mean, do you think Ohio State? They haven't won the Big Ten in what, 4 or 5 years now, so it's been a while. And Kurt Signetti, why would you not want to try and win the Big Ten, right? Your second year at Indiana, take down the reigning national champion last year. So I think there's a ton at stake here. I think this is a great game. That doesn't even mention the Heisman race, right? I mean, I don't know if it's as easy as the winner of this game will win the Heisman. But I think if Julian Sayin plays really well, say he throws for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and Ohio State wins by 2 scores, then yeah, I think he absolutely locks up the Heisman. So I think there is a fair amount at stake here, and I'm really looking forward to this one. I think this has potential to be game of the year.
And if you look at the betting odds, it appears both Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sayin are under plus 200. So Mendoza's at 135, I think. So Sayin plus 180. And then the next closest player is Jeremiah Love at, I believe, plus 400.
I think Diego Pavio's up there.
Yes, and Diego.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll see. I think the winner of this game and who plays the best in this game likely comes from the winning team and therefore wins the Heisman. I think Julian Sayin has been quite slept on all year, and people want to credit all of his doings to the receivers when reality is he's throwing these balls with elite placement and accuracy. And honestly, he's making the receivers look just as good as they make him look. So I personally think he's definitely Heisman worthy. It may not always look pretty, but it's kind of this old Jalen Hurts cliche we say, like he does everything he needs to win. He doesn't overdo it. He manages the game, but he also can do more than manage a game. And we've seen him at times just dominate with his passing. So games like, God forbid, Grambling State, I'm not even going to mention it, but he played great in that game. He completed his first 20 passes, basically, good to go. Wisconsin, bad Big Ten team, but on the road, he completes 36 of, I think, 42 passes, elite efficiency there. And, I mean, it's just he's on point with his passes. And we saw that against Michigan. I think we're going to continue to see that here against what has been a top 5 defense in the country. And while Indiana has a 50.6% chance to win according to ESPN's FPI, I think both of us, not just because we're Buckeye fans, but because we think they're the better team, we think Ohio State is going to win this football game.
Yeah, and look, I don't want this to be really be a shot at Indiana. I mean, I think this, this will say more about Ohio State than anything. I just think Ohio State is that good. I think Ohio State really has no weaknesses. If we're being completely honest. I mean, the main weaknesses or the main question marks we had coming into the year about Ohio State were Julian Sand at quarterback, and the D line, right? But Caden Curry has put that to rest. He has been phenomenal, and this defense is all playing together, right? They get pressure on the quarterback. It makes it easier on the secondary. They can play a little more aggressive. The secondary holds their coverage. It allows more time for the linebackers and D line to get to the quarterback. So this defense, they play so well together. In Ohio State on offense, I mean, with the emergence of Bo Jackson, their running game isn't as good, I think, as some people would like if you're nitpicking. But look, this passing attack it can beat anybody in the country. This run game can do enough to beat anybody in the country. I just think Ohio State just they're just by far and away the better team in my opinion. But I do think Indiana will be able to move the ball a little bit. I do think Mendoza is going to look good. I mean, he's got good receivers. This is, as much as we say, this is a big test for Indiana. This is just as big of a test for Ohio State. They have not played a team, this good this year, and I'm very high on Ohio State's defense. I seriously think that they are one of the best college defenses of all time, and I think they're going to prove that this weekend and in these playoffs. But we'll see. I mean, they have the pieces to do so. I personally have confidence in them to shut down anybody, and I don't think that's going to change here. However, this will be their biggest test. But yeah, like I said, I'm certainly looking forward to this one. Just of the magnitude of the play on the field.
And Ohio State has the best defense 2000 on, so the last 20 now 6 years of
Mm-hmm.
college. They do have the best defense. So we're going to see probably a defensive battle early on until these offenses get it going. But once they do, we could definitely see a ton of points. I don't think the winning team is going to have less than, like 24 points. Like, I do think there's going to get points scored. It's just a matter of how many. And if there's a bend but don't break mentality defensively, we saw that for Ohio State against Michigan. It could happen here. Indiana was able to claw out a few wins as well that were close, but rather lower scoring, and they had some nice drives late in both games against Iowa and Penn State to win. And against Oregon, they just frankly dominated that game, winning by 10, and they looked very good and played complete football. So I'm excited for it. We both think Ohio State's going to win, but we're going to go to the SEC now to see if we both think the winner will be the same in this one between Alabama and Georgia. Crimson Tide need a win to solidify their playoff hopes, and a lot of people say if Alabama wins, they're going to jump all the way up and be a top 4 seed. I don't agree with that. I think they should jump Texas A&M, and they should be 6, maybe 5, and swap with Ole Miss or Oregon. But I think the top 4 would at that point be Ohio State, Indiana, and that includes the winner and loser of that game. Georgia likely jumps away and out of that top 4, but that opens the door for teams like Oregon and Ole Miss to take spot 4, assuming Texas Tech wins and they are the 3 seed. If that doesn't happen, good chance Alabama jumps up. But I want to get your thoughts. You think Georgia's winning, and I think Georgia is also going to win this game. So then it comes down to the fate of the College Football Playoff Committee about whether Alabama deserves to be in the playoff.
Yeah, two things. I do think Georgia wins this game. This game kind of reminds me of Ohio State Oregon last year. Remember when they played in the college football playoff? I know it's a little bit different. I think that bye week really hurt Oregon. I think they're really rusty, and Ohio State playing the week before after the Michigan loss, I think did so much for them. But this game, look, Georgia lost at Alabama earlier on in the year. They got largely shut down in that second half, and now they come back as a 2.5 point favorites. So they're small favorites now on a neutral field. I like Georgia here. I think that they have the better offense in Alabama. I think I like Ty Simpson. I think they can step it up, but they've looked just so beatable these last couple of weeks. I mean, Auburn had them on the ropes that entire game. I know Auburn has played largely competitive against a lot of the SEC this year, but I think a better team, that isn't Auburn, probably closes that game out. So I kind of get those vibes from last year. So I do like Georgia in this game, but I would not drop Alabama out of the playoffs because I don't think that you should be punished for losing an extra game that you had to qualify for. If that makes sense. First of all, with this whole expanded playoffs, the conference championships are kind of pointless if we're being completely honest because, like Ohio State, Indiana, like do we really? I mean, do we really need to play this game? Like, we should be able to just jump right to the playoffs. I understand, they're huge money grabs and they're great for TV and they are good for the conferences. But would anybody have been upset if we had just named Ohio State the regular season Big Ten champions and just moved on to the playoff? So, um, and Georgia, Alabama, like these two teams have already played. So they might match up for a third time in the playoffs. As a college football fan, I'm not. I don't hate it. I love conference championships. I'll take as much free football, as much football as I can get. But this is exactly the scenario that you run into. Um, Alabama. I honestly, I don't think the committee is going to drop them out. I don't think that they can punish them, for losing in a game that you had to qualify for. However, though, it is Notre Dame, sitting there on that 10th spot that I guess this can kind of transition us into a little. Or we'll talk a little bit more about the kind of the format and everything. But yeah, I think Notre Dame is pretty lucky here that BYU is behind them and sitting in between them and Miami. But yeah, for Alabama, I think they're safe.
And BYU should be in the field. I think they're a top 6 or 7 team all year with their play, their strength of record, strength of schedule, all that stuff is better than Notre Dame's, but they're behind Notre Dame because the committee has this love affair with Notre Dame and their eye test. And ironically, for that eye test, just to harp on this one more time, in all the games they talk about Notre Dame and the eye test, and they get out to these dominating first halves, but they don't really do anything in the second half. Miami, despite being in closer first halves, they then dominate the second half, and there's 3 common opponents with Notre Dame that they outscored by more than Notre Dame, and the only one that was not a bigger outscoring for Miami than Notre Dame was the Syracuse game when they won 70-7. When Notre Dame put up that many points. So Notre Dame is very lucky, in my opinion, that they're in this position. So I think Georgia wins the game. I agree. I think that it's hard to see one of those teams losing twice to the other. It's pretty much the rivalry in the SEC outside of the Iron Bowl and Auburn, Georgia, that you prepare for. And I just think Alabama, while I agree with you that they shouldn't be punished and they should remain in the field, I just get this weird feeling if they lose, then there's a chance they're out. But the chance they're out would be dependent upon BYU winning. The field literally just not, or the committee, I should say, just literally putting a blind eye to Notre Dame and not taking them out. Like, that's just the reality of it. So, with the odds being what they are, which is Notre Dame minus 375, BYU plus 390, as we transition into this Big 12 championship game between BYU and Texas Tech, this game really does determine the fate of not only BYU, but also Notre Dame. I think we both think Texas Tech is a lock here, win or loss, and they should be.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fact that they're almost 2 touchdown favorites is pretty telling. And we just talked about Georgia, kind of the revenge factor. I like to play that revenge factor. I normally buy into that, as you saw with Ohio State last year. But I just think this is a little bit different. I think Texas Tech is just too bad of a matchup for BYU. I think they can really physically dominate BYU in the trenches, which is, I think, how you beat BYU. BYU isn't going to kill you through the air with big pass plays. They're going to beat you with a good defense. They're going to beat you with a good ground game. I think Texas Tech is just too experienced here. Baron Morton's played a lot of football. They've got a lot of guys. I really do think this is one of the best teams they've had in years. I think you could even make an argument for them to be above Georgia at third. To be just maybe not by resume, but I think Texas Tech has passed the eye test up to this point. And they really dominated BYU. I know they were at home and everything in their last matchup, so maybe BYU is a little more prepared this game. Maybe they even cover the 12.5, but I would not pick them to win this game. I do think Texas Tech is going to get the best of them here, and honestly, BYU should be right where Bama is. I think they should be behind Bama. I think they should be a 10. Just kind of as you said. But then that means that Miami would have to be over Notre Dame because then you couldn't put Notre Dame directly over Miami. But that's not what the committee wants. So BYU, it's a shame that they're not getting in. I mean, I think you could make an argument that they could be in over Oklahoma. Although Oklahoma, 2 losses, of course they're over Bama because they beat Bama. But yeah, I will say I think Texas Tech will win, but I'll probably root for BYU here because I think it'd be fun to get BYU in the playoff. They're young, they're a young team. But yeah, I unfortunately I don't think this is going to be the one for them.
I agree. I've kind of grown an appreciation for Texas Tech all year and the disrespect they've been given. I don't think people realize how good and how dominant this defense is. Two of probably the top five defensive players in all the country are on this Texas Tech defense. Jacob Rodriguez, who should be getting a little bit more love for the Heisman, and David Bailey, the edge rusher. But they have a very efficient offense as well. They've got two capable quarterbacks, two capable running backs, and a plethora of weapons on the or in the receiver room and in the tight end room. So Tech's a very well balanced team. I think we're going to see that on display. And while I do root for BYU to literally just kick Notre Dame out, like I have a hatred for Notre Dame at this point because how the committee's treated them. I think Texas Tech will win the game, but I am rooting for BYU to see them get in. They should be in the field anyway, as it is. But to your point, young team, they've performed very well. Kalani Sitake has this BYU team for the last 6 years, I believe it is. They've won 10 or more games, and in I think 2 of those years they've won 11. So this is flown. This is a program that has flown under the radar as a very, very good team, very good program. It's become an established program as well. And with Sitake more than likely staying at BYU now, there were reports that he would leave for the Penn State job, and I think that was kind of their last hope. It sounds like he's going to stay at BYU. I honestly like that decision because he's built them into something, and that's kind of what you talked about with Lane Kiffin. Sitake's going to do the opposite and stay at BYU, and I think win or loss, this is a very successful season for them, but I'm going to lean Texas Tech on this one. I just think they've got a little bit more firepower and they're going to get the job done. But that's not the last of the big just games that we have with CFP implications. We have two other conference championships that are going to dictate this thing. The American with North Texas against Tulane. Two head coaches on the way out as well, with Eric Morris going to Oklahoma State, John Sumrall at Florida. Sumrall will coach in this game. I cannot confirm that for Morris, though. As for the ACC, this is the wonky one. Virginia, they're very slept on season. A head coach candidate of the year for all of college football, and Tony Elliott. He's going to have his Cavaliers playing against a 7-5 Duke team who was just barely good enough. And by the fifth tiebreaker in the ACC, which is the combined record of opponents in conference, Duke edged out Miami 32-28 to, or 30-28 to, or 30-30, to 28-32 for Miami. I think that's a weird tiebreak, but it is what it is. They don't have the overall record in there or anything like that. And if that's not the only weird one, if you look at the MAC, for example, they do something completely different as well with their tie breaks. They don't account for head-to-head. They don't account for any of that stuff. So a lot of conferences have weird tie breaks. That's the case here in the ACC, where this will be the game that determines if we possibly get two G5s in, or if the committee feels bad enough for Miami and the ACC that they flip Miami and Notre Dame and they pull what we call in WWE the Montreal screw job with Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon. That's what this would be. So I want to get your thoughts on both of those games.
First of all, so BYU would have to drop down if they lose, I would imagine. So Miami, if they're sitting right behind Notre Dame, I don't know how you don't put them over Notre Dame. I think you're clearly showing some bias there. If you literally 2 spots ahead, you have Oklahoma over Alabama for the sole purpose that Oklahoma beat Alabama head to head, and if you would leave Miami below Notre Dame, I think that would just then a complete joke to the system. I don't really know how else to put it. I mean, that would just completely flaw the entire system. So yeah, Notre Dame is going to have to, they really just have to hope that BYU loses here. But yeah, I mean, it would be cool to see Virginia in because we don't really know how good Virginia is. I know they snuck by a couple of teams, so getting them in would be pretty cool. James Madison, it would be cool to see them get in, but I think it's a blowout waiting to happen, unfortunately, and I wish it wasn't, but who knows? Maybe they could prove some people wrong. But yeah, Duke winning would be some absolute just chaos. But I don't think Eric Morris is coaching in this game. I know you briefly mentioned it. I'm pretty sure that Eric Morris has already left, so maybe that has some effect on them. But at the same time, I think of it, it could potentially rally the team a little bit, right? It could kind of give them a little bit of some juice, kind of that last little push to you know win that game, that push to go make that run. So I think that'll be the interesting thing to know because it'll be the same thing with Ole Miss. Of course, Ole Miss, it's a little more scaled, because Lane Kiffin took a bigger job. Ole Miss, you're just a bigger school. You had the better season. So I think that is an important thing to note here. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would ask your take on James Madison. Now they did only lose by 2 scores to Louisville earlier on in the year, but other than that, it's the only competition you played, and I just question how equipped they are for high level competition, playing in the Sun Belt. So what do you think of James Madison if they were able to get in?
They're also a team, talking about James Madison, who has a head coach vacancy because Bob Chesney left to take the UCLA job. So James Madison, we'll have to see if Chesney's coaching in the game. I cannot confirm that, but they're in a similar boat. And if this would be the craziest scenario. If James Madison loses and Duke wins, what does the committee do? What do you have to? You have to take the 5 highest ranked conference champions, and because the Pac-2 is not a conference and neither team is even good enough to get in, you can't talk about them. You would almost have to go to the Mountain West, where I believe it's New Mexico and Boise State playing.
Boise State and UNLV, I
Oh
believe.
yes, okay, UNLV. So
Yeah,
there was a weird tiebreak there as well. They had to go
yeah.
to the computer, and initially I had saw that it was New Mexico and Boise. Maybe it's UNLV. UNLV with Dan Mullen, they've had a very good year, and honestly, if they win that game, I think they have a good case here if James Madison loses. But you can't really do the MAC because Western Michigan has 4 losses, and whoever they're playing also has 4 more losses. And same can be said for Conference USA. There's not really much to talk about in the CUSA. Western Kentucky would be the top team there, but that would be the true doomsday scenario: is Duke winning, James Madison losing, and then who is that 5th team? And maybe that is what it would take for Miami there to get in. But I think Virginia should win this game. Whether they do or not, I don't know. Duke's probably going to be riding with a lot of underdog story in this game. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Darian Mensah. They just haven't performed to the level I thought they would with a relatively easy ACC schedule. So I think for Duke, this is a interesting opportunity. But I think if you're Virginia, you got to take care of business here and at least get yourself into the playoff. As for the North Texas Tulane situation, I'm really high on North Texas. I really like North Texas, but the coaching thing is going to be interesting. I think Tulane is a really good matchup on paper, but I also think North Texas is a really good matchup on paper in terms of the two teams. So I just think North Texas will win the game. Enough said there. I don't think the head coaching thing is going to impact their offense enough. It might have some impact, but you could say similarly with Summerall and Tulane, like how are the players gonna react with a guy that they already know is leaving, right? Like how are they gonna respond to all that? Like it works both ways. So I think I'm gonna go with North Texas for sure. Give me Virginia for now, but I'll probably be rooting for Duke for the chaos aspect. James Madison wins, they will be in. That's kind of just the name of the game there. But just for sakes, if James Madison loses, and I kind of want to see it happen, and Duke wins, I would love to know what the committee does then. It would amaze me. Like I would love to know. Um, so that could be another way where Miami gets in or Notre Dame State. Like all that might dictate if the committee feels obligated to get one ACC team in there, and then they put Miami in and say goodbye to Notre Dame, who shouldn't even be in there to begin with. So I'll be curious on all of it, but those are kind of the games that we felt have the most implications because they do. And I think across the board, I think we have the same winner. So more than likely that is not what's going to happen, but I think we're pretty confident in all of the teams that are technically higher ranked to come out with the victories. I think Tulane is actually ranked higher than North Texas, but we're going to go with North Texas.
I believe North Texas is favored in the game as well, so clearly the books, also think that North Texas is the better team here despite the ranking. And again, I would probably agree with that. I think they just have too much offense. I will say the one thing I'm really hoping for in this playoff is some more competitive first round matchups. Don't get me wrong, I loved the college football playoff last year. I think the atmospheres on campus were awesome, but like Penn State blew out SMU, Indiana or kind of yeah, Notre Dame kind of blew out Indiana. You know, I believe Texas beat Clemson by 2 scores. The game's a little bit closer. It really wasn't until the second round when we got those better games. Arizona State Clemson, that was a phenomenal game. But then like Penn State blew out Boise State. So I'm just hoping for some better first round games, and I think you will get that here with like Alabama in there, BYU or Notre Dame in there. I think both those teams are going to put up a good fight. Even North Texas, I think North Texas could be an interesting team here. I think they have the offense to compete, and do they have the defense is the big question. And then James Madison, I think, is just a big question mark. So, no matter who it is, I will be rooting for some closer matchups in the first round, and not as many blowouts.
I agree. And you mentioned something earlier about Oklahoma that I was going to mention then, but it just came back to my memory now. Oklahoma's likely the worst team in the field currently. That's more than likely a lock. However, their resume is just so good that you can't leave them out. So I'll be curious to see who Oklahoma plays because I think a team like Notre Dame is a favorable matchup for Oklahoma. They have a stifling defense. They'll be able to probably stop that run game with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and force C.J. Carr to beat them with his arm. But say they play a team like in Alabama or a Miami or a BYU or a Texas Tech or anybody not named Notre Dame, basically, it could be trouble for Oklahoma. Their offense is the worst in the field, I would argue, and it even would be with North Texas in there and arguably James Madison in there or Virginia in there. But they have the probably second best defense here. I do think their defense is probably better than Texas Tech's. It's probably better than Indiana's. It's not quite as good as Ohio State's, but it's up there. They have a top four caliber defense in this playoff, but the question is, will that defense be able to carry the load and get them into a second or third round appearance in the playoffs? I doubt it. And unfortunately for them, if they stay in that 8-9 game and they win, they would have to then play Ohio State anyway or Indiana, and I don't think that's a favorable matchup for the Sooners. So just something to think about there. If the committee truly ranks them 1 through 12 or 1 through 10, I guess, by like best team, Oklahoma should probably be 10. They're probably even worse than Notre Dame is, to be honest with you, but they have a better product on the field, which would warrant them at least being 9. But that's another thing to just keep in mind. Technically, Oklahoma's not locked in. Ole Miss isn't locked in. The committee re-ranks all these teams after this week, so we might see some shakeups. We might not. I don't know. But overall, for us, like those were our conference championship games, our picks, a little bit of a preview as well, rather than going too in depth on it. I want to now take a moment for us to, since we picked the games, to pick what we think the likely top 12 will be, or how at least we would have it heading into that selection show on Sunday, to give a little bit of March Madness terminology.
Yeah, I mean, I agree for the most part with the committee. I think they mostly got it right. Besides here at the bottom, I would definitely Ohio State, Indiana. I think you have to put Georgia over Texas Tech. I'm not going to argue there. Yeah, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss. I mean A&M. You could argue that Oklahoma should be over A&M, but that A&M win over Notre Dame, I think, holds a fair amount of weight. So I don't mind them there. But yeah, I would probably have BYU. I would honestly just flip. I would move BYU up to 9, move Alabama to 10, Notre Dame to down to 12 because Miami would have to be at 11. Yeah, Miami just kind of on the outside looking in, but as I think Notre Dame should. I do think BYU should be in this playoff. Despite what happens. Although I do think it makes up for a good revenge spot for them. Because they lost to them once. If they want to get in, they have to avenge that loss, which is a good chance of happening. But yeah, honestly, I think the committee got it pretty right here. What about you?
Hypothetical here, since you mentioned BYU, if BYU was in the field like Alabama is, would they be punished for that second loss? And for Alabama, be a third loss. So, like, would that logic hold true in your opinion, or hold the same? Say Alabama loses, you don't think they should be punished for it. Does the same remain for BYU? Or does it change because they're playing the same team twice now and they would have lost to them both times?
I still don't think it changes. I think it would be a little bit different because you lost to them both. Like at least for Alabama, you can hang your hat on the fact that you already beat them. You know that you hate like that is part of your resume. So I probably would not drop out BYU just because I said the same for Alabama. I do stand firm in the fact that I don't think you could be knocked out of the playoff for playing in a game that you had to qualify for, you know, and if you didn't have the game, you'd be in. So I probably wouldn't drop out BYU, which again just kind of goes back to my point that these conference championships, as of right now, are well. I like that, you know, you have to win your conference to get in. I just think with the amount of teams at the top that are playing in the conference championship games, I think they just largely make them pointless.
And if they expand the playoff, we might have to do away with the championship week anyway to get the season done
Mm-hmm.
quicker. Realistically, the year should be done by January 1st or that first week of January. We can get into the off season and the whole second signing period and all that stuff. But that's not the case. So I do think there will be a point here where conference championships start to dwindle away and disappear. For the longest time, the Big 12 had not had one, and that hurt them some years early in the CFP era. In other cases, like for the SEC or the Big 10, like it's always been more advantageous, I think, except the one year Georgia missed it when they lost to Bama. So I don't know. I think we could see it go away in every conference if we expand to 14 or 16 or whatever the number is that it will inevitably get expanded to. But I think that I would do pretty much the same with the rankings. I think Oregon, I'm willing to give them the edge over Ole Miss completely here because of the whole Lane Kiffin thing and how that's going to impact them, potential transfers. I'm fine with A&M ahead of Oklahoma purely because they are a better football team. Despite not having the resume to even be in the field, to be honest with you, they are the better team on paper. I'm willing to move Oklahoma down, but because they have the head-to-head on Alabama, it's not going to happen. So I overall agree with it there. Really, the only thing I would change is Notre Dame being out of the field. And for now, putting BYU in with Miami right behind. But say BYU gets beat by 20 plus again, like they did against Texas Tech the first time around. Maybe that gives Miami the edge, and they jump in over BYU. Similar could be said if Alabama plays Georgia this week, and because of all these close games they've had, say Georgia beats them by 25, I think there's a better chance Alabama misses because they don't think they're one of the best 12 teams, and then they would lean a different route. So I think it's important for these teams in these games to keep them close and competitive because it's going to better your chance of remaining in even if you lose. So that's a point on that. But somewhat off topic, but on topic thing about the playoff. There's been more news and more rumblings coming out about, oh, if Texas doesn't get in, which, by the way, they're not getting in. I don't know if the rankings told that to anybody, but they're not getting in. Like, if Texas doesn't get in with the schedule they had, then we're going to see all of these big non-conference games get pretty much relinquished. Like, we won't have them anymore. Like, Ohio State is set to play Alabama in 2 straight years, I think in 2028 and 2029, and then play Georgia in 2030 and 2031. And obviously, playoff will likely be expanded by then. But the point is, the SEC got their feelings hurt, and they feel like because of the schedule they play, and then they're blaming the Texas's 3 losses thing on the Ohio State game. When reality is, if you're Texas, you should know the risk going in if you lose that game, that it puts more stress on you needing to be very good in your conference and not lose to a 4-8 Florida team, and you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. So I don't agree with blaming the non-conference loss for why Texas didn't get in. In Alabama's case, that's not what it is. They're in with the loss to Florida State. The committee on Tuesday said the craziest thing, which was Alabama lost to a FSU team that was ranked. Well, they were ranked because they beat Alabama. Like, they're not good.
Mm-hmm.
That was throughout the year. I think the committee's been very questionable in some of their logic, and honestly, very, very much like picking and choosing when to use the correct criteria and not just stacking these teams by win-loss like they have all year. Because if we're going to stack teams by win-loss like it's literally set up to be right now based off the top 12, we can just go back to the BCS because the BCS is going to do it very similarly, if not completely the same. They might have a few tweaks, but the committee's kind of diminished its purpose as time has gone on. I think this year has completely proven that. But I want to get your thoughts on the whole scheduling thing and, oh, we're going to stop playing these big non-conference games because we're not in the field. My thing is, don't lose 3 games, don't lose 4 games, don't lose to a 4-8 Florida team. I think if Texas loses to, say they lose to A&M, but they're in the field or set to be in the field, and then they lose a close one to A&M, they probably remain in the field. It's a completely different scenario. So I think the 4-8 loss to Florida and the close games to Mississippi State and Kentucky, both in overtime, did not help Texas's case. I don't think it's Ohio State's fault that Texas went in there and scored 7 points.
Well, yeah, and look, if Alabama would have lost to LSU, they would have been out, right? I mean, the whole thing is because you have 3 losses. I mean, the whole reason that Texas is even up there is because the committee is valuing that Texas only lost that game by 7, and Ohio State, is who they are. But again, if Alabama they beat LSU 20-9, if they would have lost that game, they'd have 3 losses, they wouldn't be in. So it's as simple as that. So I don't necessarily think that out of conference games are going away. I don't necessarily think that because I mean even what's the case of A&M being so high? Well, because they beat Notre Dame. Why is
Oklahoma
Miami up
as
there?
well.
Because they beat. Yeah, they beat Notre Dame. Yeah, yeah. Why is Oklahoma up there? Because they beat them, but they have that win over Michigan. So it's. I don't necessarily agree with that. Will it deter some schools from scheduling those kinds of games? Maybe, but not as much as you think. And a lot of people were freaking out over the Alabama thing, but they were literally just playing a different team from the American. It was no longer USF. They were still playing Eastern Carolina. I think they're replacing that specific game with Chattanooga because they always play. The SEC likes to play their cupcake FCS game late in the year, but then. Pretty sure they're still playing Eastern Carolina, so I mean, yeah, I guess it's a step down from USF, but people were acting like Alabama was slated to play Ohio State, and they bailed on it. It just was not the case. They switched out one Group of 5 team for another Group of 5 team, so I think it was a bit of an overreaction. And no, I honestly don't think out of conference games are going anywhere. I mean, Ohio State's got to play at Texas next year, and guess what? If Ohio State loses Week 1 at Texas next year, as long as they don't lose to a 4-win conference team, they win the rest of the way out. Maybe lose one conference game. They're probably going to get in. You just can't have 3 losses. You saw with Ole Miss last year. You just can't have 3 losses and get in. It's simple as that.
I agree. I think that is the motto: is don't lose 3 games. If you think you're going to lose 3 games, don't schedule that tough game. Texas has Ohio State next year at home, and then they again turn the clock back around and play Michigan at home. So it went Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan. Like, you knew what you were setting yourself up for by scheduling those games. And I also think Texas, in the 2 years following that, also play Notre Dame. So are they going to cancel all of those games? It doesn't make sense to. I think when you win those games, you're incentivized. When you lose those games, maybe Texas was a little bit unfairly punished, but they really weren't. I mean, they dropped from 1 to 7 in the AP poll, which I don't agree with to begin with, but that really set the parameter and set the bar for where they likely were going to rank. And if they would have just beat Florida, won the whole way out, and then lost to A&M, they'd be in the field. There wouldn't be any reason to move them down. So that's kind of my spiel on it. I think it's unwarranted, especially because it mostly comes from the SEC fan bases on, the schedule we play, and they're going to 9 games in the conference next year. So, freaking out about, well, we already play a really tough schedule, blah, blah, blah. Well, first off, speaking of the big bad SEC, they got demolished by 2 ACC teams this past week. Clemson, in the worst year they've had in quite some time, to completely just, I don't care how close it says the score was, they smacked South Carolina on the road too. And then Louisville, playing Kentucky, wins 41-0. I mean, show up at least. It's a rivalry game. And yeah, then people are going to counter with, Purdue and Northwestern. Northwestern's going to a bowl. Northwestern had nothing to play for this year. I didn't even think they'd win 3 games, and they won 6 games. So Northwestern is going to a bowl. Like Wisconsin's bad. We all understand that and we're aware of that. Um, Even teams like Iowa and Minnesota, like the middle of the pack of the Big Ten, is better than I think people make it out to be. If Nebraska doesn't have the Dylan Raiola injury, they're easily a 9-3 team, and on probably ranked, to be honest. Iowa, they have three of the best losses you can have in college football, and they're ranked in part because of it. I think they're better than the record indicates. I could say the same thing for Illinois. I could say the same thing for a Minnesota team as well. So just overall, if this none of this happens, if we just get rid of the AP poll and then we let the committee rank all these teams after like week 4, it's such an easy fix, and then we don't have to do this whole this and that and the other. But I argue for Texas real quick to circle back to them. Yeah, you're gonna get it. You're gonna miss with 3 losses though, because you were the preseason number 1. You weren't supposed to lose 3 games, and then you turned around and you lost 3 games. Therefore, you don't deserve to be in because you lost 3 games. You were the preseason number 1. You were expected to be a national title contending team, losing max 1 game, 2 if you made the conference championship game. Don't lose 3 games, especially to a 4-8 Florida team. It's very cut and dry, and it should be very simple, but it's hard for people to process. And while I agree with Steve Sarkisian's point that Notre Dame got in last year despite losing to Northern Illinois and then getting all the way to national championship, I never said I agreed with Notre Dame being in last year either. But the field was different at that time. Alabama had 3 losses, South Carolina had 3 losses, Ole Miss had 3 losses, and comparatively to Notre Dame, it stacked differently. So it just felt weird. It didn't feel like Notre Dame deserved to be there either, but they made it. They made their case. They went in the playoff and did their thing. I think that's the point Texas is trying to make, is that they're playing their best football now. They are a top 12 team right now, and they deserve to be in. However, the journey matters. How it looks along the way matters, and it has not looked great for Texas most of the year. So I don't think they deserve to be in. And that's just the reality of it. I mean, I don't know how else to say that or explain that to them, but that's kind of my logic, my thought process on the whole scheduling thing. I don't think it should change. I think teams should still schedule those big games with the understanding that if you lose the game, it could be detrimental to you moving forward. You shouldn't be rewarded for losing a game. That's not how football or any sport works. You don't get the benefits of a win when you lose. You only get the benefits of a win when you win, and then you get the benefits of a loss when you lose. It's very 1 + 1 = 2 here. I think the SEC in Texas is getting a little too hurt. I think their egos are getting hurt a little bit. And Steve Sarkisian talks about we outgained Ohio State by 200 yards. Well, you were playing catch up in the 4th quarter, and you had to actually make it a 1-score game with 3 minutes left because you got dominated. And Ohio State was just trying to get out of there, play very conservative football, try to establish the run, and win the game. That's why you outgained Ohio State. And you outgained them because you got farther down the field and didn't score. Ohio State didn't have to go as far down the field to score. It's very simple football. It's hidden in the numbers. You got to look inside the lines. That's why contextually, these committee members need to do a better job at not just box score watching or anything like that, but truly seeing teams for what they are. Miami is better than Notre Dame. They've been better than Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame. And the product they've been putting on the field has been better than Notre Dame. So, very simply put, Miami is a top 12 team. I could even say Vanderbilt's a top 12 team. They don't have a bad loss. They won 10 games. But because Oklahoma has had such a good year from a resume perspective, and they did beat Michigan, and they also don't have any bad losses, Oklahoma has an overall better chance of getting in because Vanderbilt doesn't have the resume in comparison to Oklahoma. So, long-winded speech there, but the point is, don't lose 3 games. Don't blame it on your non-conference that you decided to schedule yourself. If you had a problem with it and you thought you're going to lose, don't schedule the game. That's not why Texas is missing. It has nothing to do with the Ohio State thing. And like you said, they're only in the position they're in because they played Ohio State closer technically than any other team did. So, I mean, if they win that game, yeah, they're in the field, but guess what? Ohio State's still in the field too because they won every other game. So it's very hypocritical. It doesn't make any sense. And with that, because we're nearing our 45 minutes, I don't think we have anything left. So I'm just going to end it there before I continue to go on my soliloquy. So, episode 16 in the book here. Trayvon Hastings, Joey Korzanowski, Beyond the Box Score. Thank you to everybody who has watched, listened, or did whatever it is they do on their various platform. Like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever it is you do on that various platform. We appreciate the love and support. Make sure you guys do everything you can to also help us build our brand on this podcast up and what it is we would like to do later in the week as well. We will bring back our power rankings. It was a very chaotic Thanksgiving with the games being played Thursday through Sunday and Monday. So we elected to push back the power rankings another week. They're going to be severely updated because my Eagles have been terrible, and the Chicago Bears currently have the 1 seed in the NFC. So there's going to be some changes to our power rankings. We'll also throw some locks of the week out there as well on Saturday for Conference Championship week. We're very excited. We will definitely give our thoughts on the selection show and if any changes happen on that Sunday. But outside of that, we want to thank everybody for listening, and we hope everybody has a blessed one with a safe weekend from here on out. So, Beyond the Box Score crew, checking out. We'll see you guys in the next one.